Good evening. Thank you very much for inviting me. Spence called me yesterday about noon and said, is it possible for you to come out and speak to our group? And I thought about it for a second and I said, yeah, I'd love to, because this is the type of audience that we don't get to talk to very often unless we see you in a circumstance that's not the best for yourself. So it's great to be able to do this. And I brought with me Bert DeMello, who is instrumental in a program that he's going to talk about that he's basically running single-handedly with Henry Mayo, which is kind of a first of its kind in the area. And we're very proud of it, and he'll give you some more details on that program and how it affects the community. But basically, I wanted to come out and give you some information about who we are, what we do, for you here in the community, as well as the rest of Los Angeles County, and in 40 different states around the country. We're the largest ambulance provider in the country, and what you see here is just a sampling of what AMR is in 40 states, the District of Columbia, and some international operations as well. So I'll start big with AMR and its parent company and work my way down to who we are here and some of the facts about us here. So if you want to move to the first slide. Basically, the company is owned by Envision Healthcare. We were bought about 2 years ago now. It is a major healthcare holding company that has quite a few different companies under its umbrella, AMR being one of them. MCare, who is a provider of physician services. For instance, at a hospital, sometimes the ER doctors aren't employees of the hospital. They're leased out or rented out, if you will, to the ER and the different floors, as well as nurses. So they work for MCare, and MCare provides them. The good thing about that is if there's a shortage of nurses or doctors, we have a large supply and we can regulate to make sure that everything is fully staffed at any given time. They're Envision Care / AMR employees, but they work with the hospital and for the hospital, and they're embedded with the hospital, and that's really the only place that they work when they're assigned there. Some of the hospitals that I used to work at down in the San Gabriel Valley actually have some of those folks in there, and it's kind of interesting walking in and dealing with your own, somebody that works for the same company you do. Evolution Health provides comprehensive care management solutions for patients with advanced illnesses and chronic diseases. We also have some patient billing companies, as well as an air ambulance company that operates helicopters and airplanes to transport patients anywhere around the world. Go ahead. So AMR at a glance. We serve more communities and customers than any other private service in the nation. Our employees also participate in communities where they live and work as medical service providers and as neighbors. We have more than 19,000 paramedics, EMTs, nurses, doctors, and support staff to make a strength of the company that really, when it gets down to it, is very personal. It's not like a large corporation feel, and that comes from someone who's worked in a lot of different businesses, and it doesn't have that feel. AMR is the national headquarters is in Colorado. We provide service to more than 2,100 communities across the nation from Miami to Seattle. We're very patient-focused, customer-centered, and caregiver-inspired. We operate 911 emergency and non-emergency transports. We also have very specialized teams that can transport very, very gravely injured patients on the helicopters and airplanes, doctors, flight nurses, and flight paramedics. We deliver a wide range of services to communities, from managing entire emergency medical systems to private-public partnerships that best serve the area's needs. In some areas, we're actually embedded with the fire departments. Here, we're separated, but sometimes our units and our personnel are in the fire stations working with the firefighters as part of a team because they really would rather not handle the medical side. They want to put fires out, so we work with them in conjunction with that. Go ahead. We have approximately 19,800 employees, 4,200 vehicles. We're in 40 states in the District of Columbia, and as I said, 2,100 communities. And we transport more than 3 million patients in 2012. That's the last data I could find on a short notice. Go ahead. So this is basically a map of of Los Angeles County. It's trying to break it down a little bit. We're located right up in here. This is the San Gabriel Valley. Over in this area, we have one of our operations, which is the San Gabriel operation. And it goes all the way from basically the tip of Pasadena, the 210 freeway at Rosemead, if you know where that is, all the way over to Diamond Bar on the 57 freeway. This is where I spent most of my years working as an EMT on ambulances in this area. Then we also have Santa Clarita, which we're in here. We cover everything from the 14-5 split going southbound all the way up to the, I guess the farthest point we would go would be the motorcycle park up way up there, where one of our Ventura units that comes down from Ventura will meet us up there. And then we work all the way up to Acton, northbound into the city of Acton. The third area is our Lancaster, Palmdale operation. They take over where we leave off. They come from all the way down to Acton on the other side of the freeway and cover all the way Lancaster, Palmdale, all the way up to the Kern County line, then over to the San Bernardino line here. That's more of a rural operation, but it's a very busy area, as you can imagine, and they only have 2 hospitals up there for the large area that they serve. There was a time when AMR actually had the entire county of Los Angeles until 2007, and the reason that happened was they acquired some other companies and ended up with pretty much having the entire county. Back in 2007, they reassessed and came out with a new proposal for the county, and they split it into 4 different 911 companies. Go ahead. We have, this is just kind of a layout of our Antelope Valley operations, how many EMTs and paramedics we have. It's kind of a breakdown of a little bit of what we do up there. Go ahead. UA2, which is ours, we have 140 EMTs. We're actually larger now than Antelope Valley, and I'll tell you why in a minute. We have transport 18,063 responses in 2012, and as I said, we cover this entire valley all the way down to the 514 split. Go ahead. And then our largest operation is San Gabriel Valley. We have, right now, I think it's up to over 250 EMTs, paramedics, nurses. We also run critical care out of that operation and respiratory therapist cars that transport patients. And then you can see the difference in our transport volumes. In 2012, they transported 35,000 people. Go ahead. This is kind of just an idea about what type of equipment we have. Our ambulances, we have support vehicles, we have MCI trailers, which are stocked with a variety, a huge amount of everything, so that if we did have a major casualty incident, that we can deploy that and it would give us enough stock to last quite a while. We also have one courier vehicle. We also have a bike team trailer because we have our own bike teams, which you may have seen at some of the events around the valley. Go ahead. There are different configurations to our ambulances. We have ALS, which is Advanced Life Support Paramedics, in other words, which is 1 paramedic and 1 EMT. We also have what are called IFT units, which are interfacility transports, where we're transporting someone from one location to another, not an emergency type, but maybe back home again after a hospital stay. Excuse me. Then we also have dual paramedic staff for special events and 911 coverage. In LA County, it's kind of unique. Rather than there being 1 paramedic and 1 EMT, which is the norm for most of the country, LA County requires two paramedics on each vehicle. So if you're with, if you see the squad, LA County Fire Squad driving around with the paramedics, there are always 2 in that. And we have to have the same thing. We have to have 2 if we want to run 911 calls to back up LA County Fire if they're busy. We also have CCT staffing configurations. That's critical care transport with the nurses and respiratory therapists. Go ahead. Our communications center, believe it or not, is in Antelope Valley. So they dispatch all 3 of our areas from Antelope Valley. The reason for that is because of the split a few years ago. We transferred it up there because it has a very stable workforce. So they take care of the dispatching for all the way down to Diamond Bar from up in Antelope Valley, including us. So it's kind of odd to think about that as being so far away, but in today's day and age, in some areas, Tennessee will dispatch for Atlanta. So in this day and age with electronics, you don't really need to be right on top of the area that you're working. And that's just a little bit about what they do. You can go ahead and skip this. This is a little bit more technical stuff. Okay, community-based CPR training. Today, as a matter of fact, was AMR's national hands-only CPR. And we were able to get down our area. We went down to Valencia to the mall. If anybody was there today, you saw our teams down there. Antelope Valley and San Gabriel Valley also had teams, and the goal was to train as many people as possible on hands-only CPR. And I don't know if you got the final numbers, Bert, but I think it was somewhere around 1,500 to 1,700 people that we did in the 3 areas today. And these are just passerbys that we asked if they wanted to learn how to do it. They're people that have never done it before, don't know how to do it. And it may not, the hands-only CPR is a very basic CPR. It's not as involved as the stuff that they teach us that we learn, but it's enough to get things going until someone can get on scene to help you out. And it really makes a huge difference. In June, there will be a national hands-only CPR, not just for AMR, but for the entire country, done by the American Heart Association. And you'll probably see us out there again in great numbers, along with other companies, trying to see how many people we can get certified in hands-only CPR. So we do hands-only CPR at fairs. We do them at festivals. We'll have booths set up around, and we're teaching people all year long. Last year, the hands-only CPR, they trained 54,000 people nationwide in a 24-hour period. That's this one that happened today a couple of years ago. This is kind of a selection process for our EMTs and our paramedics. As you might have known if you've seen us around, the guys are pretty young and the ladies are pretty young. We hire straight out of the local colleges. We run them through a pretty structured process. They really have to know their stuff, and they really have to be up on their game before they're employed. They go as young as 19 years old up to, well, I started late in life about 10 years ago, so all ages and all backgrounds are accepted. We just love getting new people in there. It's a great stepping stone for other careers that you might want to do, including nursing, paramedics, fire, police. So a lot of people start their careers at a company like AMR because it gives them structure and a way to move forward. Go ahead. These are some of our contracted franchises in the area. It's a little bit hard to see, but these are some of the hospitals that we have contracts with that we help. They're mostly in the San Gabriel Valley and up here, Citrus Valley, Apple Care, Citizens Choice, Regal Medical Group, Vista Health, Palmdale Regional, and then on the next slide, I think it also talks about, now this is more for you. These are all of the community events that we do every year in Santa Clarita alone. And these are all free of charge, donated to the community to show you guys that we're here for you and not just to make money on the insurance for the transports. But if you look at some of these, a lot of them are the high schools. We do the every 15 minutes drills with the fire departments, Habitat for Humanity, City of Hope walks. And what we do at these events is we are just there to stand by in case somebody needs our help. We'll put a crew or two, or sometimes 10, 15 crews around, and they're basically just there to kind of help out. And if somebody needs their assistance, we'll help out. And we're just there to cover the medical side of all these events. Some events, like a mud run or something, or things like that, are a little bit more aggressive than some of the others, and they're very, very busy sometimes. And other ones are just basically to have a presence in, like the Halloween Carnival event. Hopefully that's not a very busy one for us. But we like to think that we're here for you in more ways than one, which is what the apparent thing is. I put this list together, and it's actually grown a little bit since this because there are some new things. We just got done with the Cowboy Festival a couple weeks ago, if you were out there, and our calendar is just getting busier. We have probably about 10 to 15 every 15-minute drills that are done at the high schools near the end of the year. If you know what those are dramatic scenarios put together with the fire department to look as realistic as possible to keep kids from drinking and driving during the graduation time. We work with them, and they set up, they get the high schoolers involved, they put makeup on them, They get real crashed cars and put them out in the street, and then they bring in the fire department and us and show what happens when a tragedy occurs. And they videotape it, and they take it all the way from there to the hospital, and they show the kids what really goes on. If you go on YouTube, you can see many of these things. They're very realistic, and the kids really get emotional about them. So that's basically in a nutshell who we are. Our headquarters is right down the street on Avenue Tibbetts for this location. We have 4 stations that are stationed around. One is right near us here, and those stations house 1 or 2 24-hour ambulances. We also have a large amount of ambulances out of our Tibbetts location. Probably about 15 deploy out of there. Some of them are specifically for transporting from hospital to home and vice versa, and others go into Los Angeles to help out down in Los Angeles. You may see our ambulances driving around at night with the lights and sirens on. We apologize if it happens in the middle of the night and goes right by you. Unfortunately, there are some regulations that the state of California has that state if you are going to respond in an emergent manner, you have to have the lights and the sirens on at the same time. We try to do the best we can to maintain ourselves as quiet as possible in your neighborhoods because we live here as well. So before I invite Bert up to talk about his portion, does anybody have any questions for me? Is there anything I can help you with or answer for you? And if I can't answer it now, I'll get your information and get back to you when I can.
Yeah, I'm not understanding the relationship. If I call 911 and you're showing up, I'm not sure how this works. Do you have a paramedic? Do they send a paramedic?
Right.
Is there a duplication? What's going on here?
Okay, so do you all remember the show Emergency in the 70s? If you remember that show, that show was actually a promotion for the development of the paramedic program in Los Angeles County. And they made a show out of it. And they had 2 paramedics on the squad and the engine, and they responded. And if you looked real carefully, you would see an ambulance also show up, but they didn't show them very often. But basically, the County of Los Angeles does not transport patients. Many other cities that you may have lived in the past or do now, they do. So you have the box truck pulls up from Pasadena, 2 paramedics get out with a fire engine. Those paramedics then put you in their ambulance and they take you to the hospital. With LA County, the squad, which is that pickup truck kind of thing with the boxes on the side, that shows up and those are the paramedics, but they don't transport. They coordinate with us and contract with us and other companies in different areas of LA County to do the transporting for them. So if it's quite a serious event, one of the paramedics jumps on the ambulance with us to care for the patient. One of us drives, the other is in the back assisting that paramedic. Meanwhile, his partner follows in the squad to the hospital. You've probably seen that a lot, where there's a red squad truck following the ambulance. So that's how the system works. If it is deemed that the patient is minor and really is a basic life support and doesn't need the paramedics, then the paramedics will clear from the scene and we will take the patient to the hospital ourselves without and there are certain protocols that dictate which is considered a major event and which is a minor event. Hope that answers that question for you. Sir.
Do you ever render any medical aid, or is just the paramedics do that? And what would happen if you arrive before the paramedics?
Yeah, that happens a lot, especially in the middle of the night. And sometimes we'll just happen to drive right by an incident that happens many times. So we're first on scene a lot. Basically, our job at that point, if we don't have a paramedic on board, is to get information from the patient, find out what's happened to the patient, start initial treatment, and then give a report to the paramedics when they get on scene. There are not that many differences between a paramedic and an EMT other than that the paramedic can administer medications and do some advanced airway things that not even nurses in the hospital can do. So when you go to EMT school, it's about 16 weeks. After you've been there about 6 months, if you wish, you can go to paramedic school, and paramedic school takes about an additional year. And a lot of that is riding out with other paramedics to learn on the road. So we are on scene a lot, and sometimes for a good amount of time with a cardiac arrest without any support, and it gets pretty nerve-wracking. But we carry AEDs, we can shock, we can start all the initial CPR and such on a unfortunate situation. So, but they're always en route right behind us. And if they're not, because they're saturated, then we have our own dual paramedics that can cover for them, but they're considered the first in. So. Yes, sir.
Yeah, we've been hearing some horror stories about the cost of these transportations. We've been hearing horror stories about the cost of transportation. I don't know if that was here or in some other community. And they said, for instance, if a person had minor injuries, the ambulance rolled with the 911 call, arrived with the paramedics. We heard of a case where someone told whoever was in charge in the area, I don't want the ambulance, call me a cab. And the cab was much cheaper.
Sure.
But they were talking numbers like $3,000 to $5,000 to transport in the Santa Clarita Valley. So my question is, if a pedestrian or bicyclist got knocked down at Sand Canyon and Soledad and got bruised up, and the ambulance is going to take him to Henry Mayo, what would that cost?
Well, you ask a lot of great questions, and let me break them down. First of all, if a patient is cognizant of their surroundings and can answer questions that the paramedics or the EMTs ask them, you don't have to go to the hospital, first of all. If you do, you can choose to go by your own vehicle. You can choose to go by any means you have. We're not going to kidnap anybody, and we're very cognizant of that. And if that's the case, then by all means, we just have you sign a piece of paper saying that you're responsible for it, and if you need to call us again, please do so, and we'll come out, and there's never a charge for that. As a matter of fact, there are many things that do not require our assistance. They may seem like it at the time because it's a very urgent issue, but as it comes down, it's not, and a lot of people determine that they want to go on their own. That happens all the time. In certain areas, people are more reliant on the ambulance service because they don't have their own transportation. So that gets into a whole nother thing. If you're transported by an ambulance, one thing to remember is that all of our rates are governed by the county. We don't set our rates. Their rates are governed, and the maximum charges allowable are set forth by the County of Los Angeles. Down to the price of oxygen, an oxygen mask, a Band-Aid, everything is regulated by the County of Los Angeles. In addition to that, if you were to require a BLS transporter, the basic without the paramedics is one rate. Paramedic jumps on board, it jumps up again a little bit for a different rate. And then there are some of the equipment that we use and such like that. Now, as far as the rates, the insurance companies will pay what the insurance companies are going to pay. If we charge, just to jump ahead, to answer your question, I'm guessing they charge by the mile as well, so I'm guessing that one would be somewhere between $900 to $1,000 for that. I've never heard of anything being in that kind of range unless we're doing a long distance transport from here to San Diego or something, then it can get up, but that's way too high. The other thing is to think about is that Medicare, as you guys know with everything else, Medicare pays up to what they're going to pay, and then those are negotiated rates with us, as with everybody. And then if there's any balance left over, sometimes that's what the gap insurance is for. Medi-Cal, whatever Medi-Cal pays is what we can bill for. It's the best insurance in the world for some reasons like that, because we can't charge the patient any more than what Medicaid or Medi-Cal wants to pay. So if they pay us $50, they pay us $50, and sometimes those rates are that low. So you hear in the news, write your congressman about maintaining the Medicare, Medicaid rates. That's because they want to continually cut, and it's cutting everybody way down to the bone. So it's not really a large. The 911 system is not a moneymaker. We do a little bit better on when we're transferring patients from one hospital to another because we work it out with the hospital. But 911, the way I like to look at it, if you were opening up a business and someone came in and said you're only going to be able to collect on 33 to 35% of the things that you sell at your company, you'd be out of business in 5 days. Well, that's what the collection rate is for the 911 system. Most of the time, we never get we never were able to collect through whatever reason, no insurance or whatever. So that's made up by other revenue to meld into a profit margin for all ambulance companies. But all those things are published on the county website, all of our rates and what we charge and what's allowable and what's not. So, and if you have any additional questions, I can talk to you on the side if that helps. But you absolutely have the right to sign out and not go, to take your own vehicle, to have a friend drive you. We just want to make sure that you get taken care of if you need to. And we'll do our best. Some people say, I don't want to go, and they have this big knot on their head. That's not a real safe thing, but if you're cognizant of your surroundings, can make those decisions, that's your decision, and we don't change that. Can't change that. So, yes, sir.
Yeah, sorry, I got to ask one more here.
Sure.
I've never called 911, hope I never have to. I'm also not an attorney, but I still have to ask this question. I call 911, you respond, they don't, maybe you get there first, you start rendering aid. Mm-hmm. Is the county liable for anything that goes wrong? How does that situation work? I'm not getting what's going on here.
Well,
you're contracted by the county.
Correct.
So if you show up and render aid, if God forbid something goes wrong, then they're responsible. Is that correct? Is that because you are contracted by them?
Well, I think it would fall to the county first, and then it would be disseminated down to us. If we have as I say, we run in 40 states, and issues have come up in the past. I think that basically, if we, let me change that for a second, take the medical out of it. If we hit your car by accident or something like that, again, that's just straight through our insurance company with your insurance company, et cetera. The same would be for any medical issues. It would go through the insurance companies. The county may or may not be involved depending on the situation. Every single case is different. They are in charge of the scene. If the fire department has been dispatched, we work under their authority, so they're responsible for the scene, and their captain is ultimately, and their battalion chief is ultimately responsible, and then it would trigger down from them. And every once in a while we have a meeting with those guys, and we say, what are we doing well, what do we need to do better? We're constantly communicating with the fire departments to make that clear. But to answer your question, it would depend on the situation. But that's why our EMTs are very good at not working outside of their scope of practice that they're allowed to practice under. And in no time do we ever go beyond that because of liability reasons.
Are you allowed to use both your lights and your siren on the freeway?
No, we're not. The only time we use our lights and sirens on the freeway is if we're approaching the scene and we need to clear people out to let them know that we're right behind them and to kind of get to the scene. As you can imagine, sometimes that's a little difficult. But when we're on the freeway, we have to abide by the exact same rules that you do. On the city streets, we're allowed to go 10 miles an hour over. But on the freeways, we have to mimic exactly what the regular driver does. I think the only ones that really can drive for any given time on the freeway, of course, is PD or sheriffs or CHP. Any other questions in the back?
Yes. I'm sorry, I have an accent. I hope you are going to understand.
That's okay,
me.
I like it.
It seems like there is more and more traffic in Santa Clarita. How does that affect your time of response and transportation?
I think your question was, how does that affect our response times?
Yes.
Is that okay? It does, and we are mandated by the county to be on scene to a 911 call in 8 minutes 59 seconds from the time the call drops into our computers in Lancaster. So we don't always make those times, but we have to make them an average of a percentage of time, because some of them are pretty far away. If you're responding to Fraser Park or someplace that's way out there, that's sometimes a 15, 20-minute, 30-minute response time. So it varies. But yes, traffic does affect us. I used to always like to work the night shift when there was, in the middle of the night when there were no traffic. And then medians, you wouldn't be surprised how hard these new medians are for us to get around, because we can't oppose to the other side very easily with these long stretches. And so if there's a bunch of cars going home at 5 p.m., we basically have to shut the sirens down and just wait. If we can jump over to the other side, we will, but only when necessary. But yes, it does affect us, especially down where I came from. The traffic down there is just amazing in the evening when everybody's going home. And the dispatcher has a responsibility to also respond the appropriate crew based on traffic needs. So if I have a crew that's twice as far away from the call, but they're going with traffic instead of against traffic, they may get the call because overall they'll beat that time in because they don't have to worry about the traffic. And that's a sign of a good dispatcher that knows the traffic flow patterns of each individual area.